What is up, everyone, and welcome back to the latest Skywatch development for Lost Skies. I am so pumped to share this update with you all since we are getting to so many videos of new public content, as well as a bunch of news on a fundamentally changing end look and overall structure of Lost Skies as a whole, which I will get to near the end of this video. Now, since it has been about a month and a half since the last cover, I will quickly recap what the game is about. That being, Lost Skies is a co-op survival game where you will play as a nomad in a world of floating islands, which have flotation properties due to a material known as Atlas. This world, which packed full of different challenges for you to face, will contain all sorts of flying enemies, as well as land creatures and technological entities that you will encounter and need to face off. As you explore the different islands, completing loot-filled puzzles and challenging massive bosses with your skyship and skyship weapons, either by yourself or with your friends. Now, while Lost Skies is definitely still in more of a pre-alpha to alpha stage, there are a bunch of new videos and clips shared in covering the newest mechanics and additions to the game that make me extremely excited to see where Lost Skies will go. So without further ado, I'm just going to get straight into the newest content. Starting with the character customization, where the team has been hard at work expanding a variety of customization options for the game. John and Claudia have been compiling a bunch of different presets and a variety of unique hairstyles, face paint, skin tones, and head types in coercion with different test models to help express these different kinds of cultures that are being worked on in Lost Skies. Also showing us many of the different cultures' names in association with those representative styles, including names like Kyoki, Marshals, and even the Gaul, whom some of you may know only thus far have insane technological advancements, at least in what we've seen so far in the game, and many of the game's mechanics and tools. Consequently, seeing them look almost alien-like in nature with their piercing green eyes, which just looks super frickin' cool. In addition to this, they have shown a cool video demonstrating Danny's latest tests, showing a full face rig, which might set up the devs down the line to add different kinds of emotes and expressive movements, even showing levels of control over each portion of facial expressions, which they can actually make down to the smallest details. Moving on to the world building, we get to see a bunch of new ambient VFX additions, including wind effects and blowing debris in open fields, also being shown off in different testing areas for the game. And with this, as well as distinct audio, we get to see an almost mystical looking particle set for the different day and nighttime settings, as well as an extremely calming and refreshing background ambience for the game as well, with periodic tweeting birds and other animals nearby. With this, we also get to see their work on rarity system representation for different items in the game, where they each will have their own color-coded look, and they iterate on the different options that they will have available when deciding how they want to actually structure their look in the end. In addition, with this, we also get to see a small video of the player using the Atlas lifter on a large boulder, showing the glowing visual and how the boulder flattens the grass as it slowly glides across the ground with the flotation effects of using the device. Next, we have some new respawning mechanics and additions to the underside biome of islands, where they iterate that their latest system tackles world resets and item respawns to prevent players from running out of resources, where Thomas has implemented a resource respawning format every 10 minutes on the tutorial islands and every 2 hours in all the other areas, which means that nobody will be stuck in the first area without the necessary resources to get to new islands and discover new locations in the world, where we get to see a split-screen gameplay example showing how destroyed entities and loot area animations look when and how the loot respawns for those locations actually occurs. In addition, with this, we also get shown off Tony's implementation for a new sub-biome underside/island edition, which will supposedly support new resources and a new creature which has yet to be actually specified, where the video denotes yellow markers of what I would imagine are spawn locations for those creatures and likely a biome type that fits within the land location category of those undersides for the islands themselves. Moving on to bosses and herald developments, the art team has continued to iterate on new herald variants, with their latest quote Shark Herald design being in its white box stage, which shows their early development of its design and iterations and possible design structure for overall shaping, as well as the very cool movement and attack patterns which while they didn't add audio in for this, shows off the side-to-side movements as it performs various attack patterns and movements which help dodging the player gunfire and cannon fire attacks. Moving on, we have some brand new content on the development of the Arc and Arc computer, where, as it is indicated by the video and previous information from other Skywatches, will be a device that was made by one of the cultures known as the Gaul. This seems to allow you to unlock certain craftables going forward at the cost of spending data disks, where this is an example of the player unlocking the Atlas lifter as well as the Saborian shipyard, and briefly showing off the other ship craftables needed for skyship building and design. In addition, with this, we also get to see an early Arc computer dialogue structure where it's indicated that Vlad and Ellen have been working on the updated visuals for the tech tree and UI adjustments for those different things, and that Vlad has just started on this dialogue interaction system within the computer itself, which the devs have indicated that it will be an important narrative delivery function in regards to the game's lore in Lost Skies, which gives me the impression that this Arc computer station has been equipped with an AI that likely has been made to help with the remnants of humanity that were saved by the Arcs during the Great Cataclysm that we have been hinted at in the Lost Skies lore a few times before. With this, John also continues to work on the Arc and its technological design, where we get to see some images of different trim sheets made, where with this we also get to see a small video showing off the different close-up views on different buttons, switches, and even frames of the paneling within the ship itself. Next, we have the debuffs and health systems, where Matt has been working closely on a unified buff/debuff system for the game. This includes elemental effects like burning and wetness, as well as damage over time known as DOT effects, which are based on different debuff stacks. It's also planned for these same systems to extend to these ships as well, adding a further layer of intricacy when it comes to different forms of combat in the skies, where in these examples we get to see demonstrations of a player interacting with a campfire stove and shooting a manta with what I would imagine to be bullet types, or maybe some kind of type of weapon that applies burning effects to the manta when the player actually shoots it, which has a set indicated time marker on the actual entity. In addition, with this, we also get to see a small video of the plans for bandages in the game, showing a video of how the bandages will add a small health boost over time, and that while in use, the healing animation will stop if you begin to sprint, grapple, or dodge as well, specifying that the actual visual arm and body animation hasn't been yet made, but that the functional and technical implementation actually does work, where we can see the player in combat with a small herd of drones briefly taking a moment to heal with said bandage, with his arm looking super wacky and janky in the air, but nonetheless showing the actual functionality and application correctly and in the way that they want it. The next addition that we have is VFX and audio magic, where it's indicated that Mark's latest sound effects to the game adds even more immersion, where he has now integrated indoor and outdoor audio occlusion, meaning that the ambient sounds like wind will quiet when indoors, where you can also notice that beautiful audio shift when coming outside to view Tutorial Island, as well as hearing and seeing the blowy, windy VFX and SFX forestry sounds of mantas, birds, and many other animals surrounding you, all working in a beautiful, stunning harmony. Moving on to the datapads, these have been pushed forward into a fully conceptual iteration, where these devices have been explained to be objects that you will place in the island creator to provide players with custom lore, hints, or guidance, where you can see John has finalized the concept art for them, and that Mark has begun implementing the actual feature, where in the concept art we also get to see 3 steps of animation showing how the device will open up, revealing a holographic visual, which helps further the stories for those individual islands that will be made by the players and the developers themselves. Next, we have a more minute quality of life addition for the ship upgrades and customization, but nonetheless integral, where John's new concepts for ship core attachments are shown off, which are a part of the progression loop, mentioning different devices like the Atlas Enhancer and Energy Focuser and Advanced Generator. These, likely similar to the style of upgrading formats of Worlds Adrift, will enhance your ship core, allowing you to increase ship weight capacity, structural integrity, response time, and many other factors to enhance defense and options for weaponry that is available on your ship. However, the specifics to that end aren't made completely clear yet, so we will have to wait to find out more. But to the end of shipbuilding experience, Tony has improved the building system by implementing dynamic stamps or stackable objects, as well as responsive icons which reflect customization, where in this video we can see a player put down a rug, a block, and then attach a series of stools to the side. Now, being able to grab those objects as a functionally grouped entity, that means that any form of large-scale changes that you want to make to your ship's look, placement, and layout will be faster and much easier than individually selecting and replacing each specific item on your ship one at a time. With this, we also get to see the newest iterations of holographic item selections, seeing how when selecting an actual item within the build menu, like a ship cannon, it shows up directly onto the hologram of the Gaul disc itself, and that within each of these selections, for example cannons, wings, and ship additions, we can see different schematic components for each piece of the object. For example, with this rare cannon, we can see how they select different components of the cannon head, rotary ammo feed, cannon barrel, and cannon base. Each of these components can be modified, which contain their own crafting costs, and each of those have their own individual components that can be selected either by default or personally with different types of materials and metals which have their own respective material properties, changing how much that cannon weighs, affecting its resilience, its power, its heat resistance, pitch, motion range, and yaw motion range, rate of fire, mobility, and even its lift respective to its size. All of these factors being considered means that you have so many different elements to consider when you are actually designing your ship, which also means that it can be extremely and highly modified and optimized to handle those different kinds of fighting scenarios and be resistant to specific kinds of damaging attacks, as well as specific mobs or even weather damage as well. And again, while none of this stuff is anywhere near its final iteration, it's still very awesome to see just the level of detail control that we will have when it comes to the ship modification and design, where the devs mentioned they are extremely excited to see what kinds of creations that we all come up with when the game does release. Next up, we have what is my favorite and final section of the Skywatch thus far, that being the cave bug and combat improvements, where the devs mentioned that they have put together an attack squad to handle the game combat made up of people from programming, VFX, and design, where they have been working on cave bug encounters. And as part of this, they are introducing a new ranged cave bug with acid projectiles that can break grappling lines, which contains much more fleshed out animations compared to before, with cleaner transitions into jump attacks, underground burrowing attacks, and dynamic transitions to different movesets within larger swarms as your player struggles to fight them off. With this, we also get to see a neat little video showing the different goo projectiles and how they can be modified via color changes, splash type, and sizes for those cave bugs and mantas, where we can also see the fluctuations of different playback times within each individual animation, kind of showing off that level of control that the devs have when it comes to the specificity of how that goo splashes, how it moves in the air, the kind of spread that it has in terms of flipping your hitbox, and many other factors as well. But the most interesting thing I want to show you for the Skywatch, and one of the last main things I'm going to show you, is the MS-12 drone fight, which shows off a humongous compilation of all the different physics-driven reactions and many different enemies in the game, all fighting you simultaneously, where Tom has been very hard at work making it so that each enemy can also adjust their own positions when they get hit, so that combat can be way more dynamic. Where we finally get to see the new tank drone in action, which seems to be over 4 times the size of a normal drone, has a huge amount of defense, and uses a Gatling gun styled weapon, where in this video we get to see the player also utilize the climbing mechanics in the game, using the trees as cover from the onslaught of projectiles coming their way, which consequently from the new universally added damage functions means that the enemies themselves also destroy and take down those same trees that you use as cover and for your own resource collection, where the player still desperately holds on to this tree as it breaks from the enemy drones. And at the same time, we get to see how the sniper drones and tiger mantas work to attack you from different angles while those tank drones fire at you, showing how the enemy's dynamic attack functions work against the player unanimously. Also seeing how the player is able to grapple to the tank drones to yank them down and stun lock them before they charge up a new attack, and even use the drone spawner itself as physical cover. Also showing off the heal drones, which help to repair the enemies and adds another level of consideration during combat and actually deciding which enemies that you take down first. Nearing the end of this fight, we also get to see how the gunfire from the player has directional force, which pushes the enemies back as you shoot them, where as the sun comes up, the player then stuns and pushes back an enemy tank drone, requiring them to grapple down to the enemy and continue attacking it below, even allowing the player to go so far as to literally grapple to the enemy and dangle from it while simultaneously attacking it. Which overall, I think that this new content from Lost Skies has been absolutely crazy in terms of how far the devs have come both in the game physics engine and demonstration of how those interactions work between the enemy and the players and their own individual mechanics, as well as the world building design elements as well. It has just been so crazy to see all of these previous plans for new content from past Skywatches actually come to life. But while that is the end of the Skywatch, it isn't actually all of the content and information that the devs have showed off, where recently one of the devs named Sync has shown off the movement clip showing the player climbing, gliding, and grappling around Tutorial Island, taking out some enemy turrets, which just looks super beautiful to play. But aside from this, I also wanted to take the time to cover some of the recent changes to the plans of Lost Skies, as well as its end game structure, as I mentioned in the start of this video. As of very recently, in the past few days, the lead developer of Lost Skies, Luke, has mentioned that they removed the iterated 1 to 6 player plan structure in the website description for Lost Skies. Part of this reasoning for that change was that a lot of players, including myself, made it very clear that they would like to be able to create dedicated servers for the game. As many of the people from Worlds Adrift may remember, the devs team's previous game, it used to solely function as an MMO, where devs were effectively paying a third party to even run the game in the first place, whose server structure was also not even owned by them. Consequently, when the game inevitably ended due to an ineffective server costing structure, it was often mentioned that they wanted to make the new development in Lost Skies work such that the game's entire functionality wasn't dependent on the servers that nobody actually owned, and that this was counteracted with the fact that the devs wanted to make it a solely 1 to 6 player limit for the worlds and that the players themselves would host them. This way that players could continue playing their games even if the company was gone and not running anymore, with the options to have, higher levels of players being hosted in those servers. Simultaneously, there was a large demographic of players that wanted to still be able to have a massive dedicated server structure similar to that of Rust, which allowed them to feel challenged both by the unknown enemies of the actual entities that you fight and encounter, as well as those unknown players in the world. Thus, it seemed that to cover both sides, ensuring that everyone can have either experience of either a small self-hosted world with your own rules on PvP and game structure, as well as those options to join a larger dedicated server, the new plans are that player limits will not be capped, and that in addition, the end goal is to have fully dedicated servers, which I personally think is fantastic news, as having the options for both can allow players who don't want that PvP experience to do their own thing, as well as allowing the people who want and miss that large server PvP experience, similar to that of Worlds Adrift, to be happy as well. Now, while this has been stated before in past Skywatches I've shared, the full-scale effectiveness is not perfectly balanced around PvP. It is still a question as to how well this will work as this gets upscaled to larger and larger servers, maybe even as big as 100 to 200 people. While everything is still being constantly tested and optimized, Luke has stated that in playtesting they still do chaotic PvP fights, and that currently, in terms of what you can do to other players and player ships, it functions the same as Worlds Adrift in terms of those combat mechanics, which is a good marker for those that were really looking forward to that style of play in Lost Skies, where Luke also mentions that the options for a quote Worlds Adrift Battle Royale will exist. The last new piece of content I want to quickly cover is going back to the facial expressions and body movements. As of the time I am writing this script out currently, Luke has just dropped another clip showing their early facial rigging, or a character showing different angry and surprised looks as well, as an early animation rigging for the bandage animations too, which I think is pretty cool. But aside from all that stuff, I think overall there was a ton of new stuff shared in the recent Skywatch, as well as integral information in terms of the changing and still kind of up in the air plans as to how the end goal of Lost Skies is going to look, but nonetheless very interesting to learn about, as well as clips in the Discord that was shared throughout this whole month leading up to it. So I do truly hope that this was at least beneficial to some of you and at least informational in that respect. So I do think Lost Skies is slowly but surely making its way in the world, so seeing so many fantastic new additions, game improvements, and mechanics, I absolutely cannot wait until this game gets finished. But I will make sure to post all the links to their Discord so you can sign up to the game to possibly be selected for open development to actually playtest this game, and so that you can see new content and updates from them directly before I actually post these, as well as a link to the Skywatch so you can also look over and review any of the newest public information yourself. But regardless, thank you all once again, and have a beautiful rest of your day, boys. Peace.